There was a flash of light as I walked up that I thought I had buried, and it sort of distracted me, and I lost my train of thought for a second. What am I doing here? Oh, yes, barrel entry proof. I'm talking about barrel entry proof. Because, I mean, why not? You guys like the nerd videos, and this is definitely a nerd video. So this came about because one of the things I keep reading about in more and more brands, they've always talked about it, but for some reason, I'm showing up everywhere in my feed and in books. And have you ever had that thing where, I can't remember what it's called, there's a name for it in psychology, but say you buy a Nissan Murano, and then the next day you realize there's Nissan Muranos everywhere. Or you get really interested in this one thing, and then for the next 2 weeks you see it everywhere. There's a cognitive name for that someone can put in the comments. But I've been seeing discussions about barrel entry proof all over the place. And so I just wanted to give you a really quick primer on why it matters. And barrel entry proof is the alcohol content of, or the proof or percentage ABV of the new make spirit before it gets put into a barrel to age. The standard legally right now, and by standard I mean not the standard, the maximum that you can put whiskey, bourbon, rye, malt, single malt, into a barrel in North America right now is 125 proof, right? 62.5. And in the UK, it's different. They can go way higher, but they tend to also do somewhere in the 120s range for pot still single malt type things. It's not a standard at all. And it's only been 125 for about 40-ish years or so, really 60, but it's only been like consistently used by the industry for about 40 years. And before that, it was 110 was the maximum proof. So it actually, at 1962, it changed from 110 to 125. And there's reasons, and we're going to go into why. But have you ever read in literature, you see Maker's Mark talk about their low barrel entry proof. You'll see Russell's Reserve talk about how they go in, this is 115, I think, that it goes into the barrel at. And then others go real low, 100. You'll see craft guys talking about 100 proof into the barrel, 105, 110. It changes. The shortest version of this is, and this is the shortest one, when you age at a higher proof, you extract more of the astringent tannic characteristics of the barrel. And when you age at a lower proof, you add more water, and as you extract congeners and things like that, like wood sugars, they are water soluble, and so they sort of dissolve into the spirit a little more aggressively. And so when you age at a lower proof, you get more of the softer wood sugar type, vanillin type directions, right? And also a softer mouthfeel, which is a word I hate, but it is what it is. It allows the congeners that at a lower proof to break down and oxidize over time. Higher proof means less water, means less of that happening, and also domination by the more astringent tannins and things like that. When you get to chemicals, like esters and aldehydes, they're relatively stable on their own, and they're kind of bulletproof within the range of proofs that we're talking about. Now, what do I mean by high proof? High proof is 125. If you do a barrel entry that's a high proof, it's 125. If I say barrel entry low proof, or a distillery says low barrel entry proof, there's no legal definition of that term. TTB does not police that in any way whatsoever, but typically what it means is 115 and under. Better to be 110 and under, but I've seen people 115 say low barrel entry proof. So historically it was 100 actually, and there were a couple reasons for that. One was it's a really great level where the balance of alcohol and water carries the most of things and allows good oxidation. Also remember that prior to, Forrester and a couple of others, whiskey was consumed from the barrel or sold by the barrel and often consumed from the barrel. And so you needed your whiskey coming out of a barrel to be a lower alcohol content, be consumable right away. And so it was way more common for the whiskey inside of a barrel to be a lower proof, and it softened it. It also means that the sort of oxidation and softening age type things happen younger, right? And so you get oxidation of certain chemicals at a younger age than you would if you have a higher entry proof, right? And so very often when you, in Texas, for example, when we're having to deal with certain ingredients on a train getting ahead too fast, one of the things that you can do is take a barrel entry and bring it down. At Crowded Barrel, we had one that was 2 years old, and it was really, actually it's 3 years old, and it was really starting to get tannic and wooden, and so we took it down 10 proof. And then a year later, it's softening, and it's getting a little bit more of the wood sugar accents. There's a little more oxidation happening on those chemicals. It really works, right? Why 125? There were a bunch of studies done, and actually in the 60s, it was a Canadian company. Who was it? Was it Hiram Walker, who did a really elaborate study about barrel entry proofs, and there's been more since then. But 125 sort of entered the stream of consciousness as, if you're going in at 125, and you're in a climate where water evaporates first, you have less angel share if you have a higher proof. So that's nice. And second, it's a hell of a lot cheaper to store less barrels. And the higher entry proof you can go into a barrel, the less storage of barrels you have. The same amount of spirit, new make, alcohol content can go into less barrels than if you proof it down and increase the volume of the liquid. You have to have more storage. Storage is expensive. This doesn't affect craft guys as much as it affects people who are storing, 100,000 plus barrels at a time. It becomes real if you can eliminate 10,000 barrels. That's a crap ton of storage, right? But it's not just about what happens when you alter, it's about how long you have. Remember our quick aging video and all of that we're going to talk about. But first, let's drink this. This is a gift from Mark Jacobson. And notice that it's well consumed. This was brought to Whiskey Somm class. And in December, we had 2 back-to-back whiskey classes. And the Somms just flooded the vault with a bunch of new fun stuff. This was brought to share with the other Somms. The other Somms enjoyed it very much. And I was like, you know what, screw it, let's do a video on it. Because I hadn't heard about it because I'm very, very bad at staying up on the news of new releases and what's going on in American, actually in all whiskey. But everyone was like, everyone on the internet is talking about this thing. It's a real big deal. And I went and Googled it. And sure enough, holy crap, it's everywhere. I mean, there are dozens and dozens of videos and blog posts. And so this will just be another one. But it actually, there's a reason, and it's because of the proof entry discussion. This is 15-year-old Russell's Reserve, Jimmy and Eddie Russell on the front of this thing. Now, historically, there have been other age statements, I think 13, on special releases of these kinds. But the story was they've been sort of putting more of the 13 into the lower age statement whiskeys for flavor profiles, and they held back some of those barrels and sat on them at the Camp Nelson campus. And when they hit 15, the discussion was, or Eddie's point was, tasted them like, 10 or a dozen times or something like that. And when it hit 15, he was like, yes, this is the sweet spot. Everyone I've read said it's amazing. This is a mix of roughly 75% 15-year-old whiskey and 25% 16-year-old whiskey. We'll see. I haven't even picked it up because I wanted to go in fresh. Oh, man. That smells good. So, I got to tell you, remember that Wild Turkey 101 is, for me, the perfect bourbon. And I know everyone has their preferences, but if I just wanted to go to the store and I knew I was going to love it, and I didn't have to think about it, and I knew most of the people in my group would enjoy it, it would be Wild Turkey 101. That's kind of my default bourbon as a non-preferred bourbon guy. From the Kentucky bourbons. If we're talking Texas and other states, Starlight, oh, Jesus, so good. But if we're talking Kentucky bourbon, Wild Turkey 101, kind of my default whiskey. And so I already know that I like the directionality, and I love the Russell's Reserve 10, and not as much as the Wild Turkey 101. But this one is smelling incredible. It is walnut and brown sugar, pastry, dark cherry chocolate, and almost a tobacco in a leather chair note, like pipe tobacco, aromatic pipe tobacco in an old leather chair. I can see why people are freaking out about this because it smells really good. I am predisposed to like it because of the reasons I stated. Woo! Oh, you know what I forgot? Water. And also, this is 58.6%, 117.2 proof. Hang on one second. We're going to cut back to me getting back here with water. Okay, I couldn't find my normal glass, so we're using this one. I'm not going to add water yet, but I'll tell you, I've been sick, and I had an unintentional dry week for the last week. For a week because I've not been feeling good. And so this is the first time I've had alcohol in about a week. Woo dog! This is a serious one to start with. It's really rich, but the ethanol caught me off guard because I'm a little fresh today. I'm going to try a sip again. I love the nose. Coming back, it's almost smoky. Okay. There's a tannic bite to the finish of this. That's okay, but I really love this like dense brown sugar coated walnut sort of waxy note. And then wooden accents. I'm going to let that water. I'm going to bring it down just a little bit more. We're going to let that sit for a second and see what happens. Okay. So barrel entry proof. People don't assume that barrel entry proof is some objective reality that if you put this in a barrel for 110, you will get this. And if you put this in a barrel at 115, you'll get this. What you will find is all real brands have or are currently doing or have done a ton of experimentation on barrel entry proofs to find out where their new make ends up after a 2, 4, 5, 6, 8 year period. And you'll get experiments like Four Roses did where they said they're like 120, which is crawling in on high, is actually perfect for creating the Four Roses profile. You'll hear the same thing from Maker's Mark. Independent stave company, Andrew Weinbrink, I'm probably getting his last name pronounced incorrectly. Sorry, Andrew. Independent stave company did a 6-year-long experiment where he did proof entries of 100, 110, and 125, and then ran gas chromatography, a mass spectrum gas chromatography that basically just like isolates all the chemical compounds and shows you what they are, and across 45 compounds. And he measured from the different proof entries, right, within ISC barrels. And what it showed was basically what we've already known. Now, keep in mind that this is a very common thing in whiskey, which is history, right? Copper was used originally by people making stills because it was highly malleable and highly transferable when it came to temperature, right? And so it's easy to shape and it transferred heat and things real well. It wasn't until much later when it came to copper that we discovered that copper actually, the chemical compound of copper, actually bonds and removes sulfur compounds from a new make spirit. So it actually improves the flavor. That was discovered much later as far as scientifically. People knew that long before we showed it scientifically. People have known for a very long time, like 150 years plus, that barrel proof entry affects final product, right? I love that everyone is still doing experiments to try to truly understand what and why. I think that's amazing. But what Andrew's study found was, and I wrote this down, these compounds, higher entry proofs love the phenolic, the trans-isogenol and the cis-isogenol, and vanillins, like hard toasted vanillins, right? And so phenolic notes are that's the direction of that tannin astringent kind of thing, right? And the lower entry proofs love glycol, furfural, 5-HMF, and 5-methylfurfural, which are nutty, caramel, slight smoky notes, right? And so, of course, you get these like softer impacts, and then you get this like dramatic impacts on the higher proof. We've known it for a long time, but it's a very real thing. Now, remember that all it does is affect what there is to play with over time, right? So if you focus on a lower entry proof, then 6 years later, with the same exact new make at a higher entry proof, you're going to be handing oxidation and additive and you're going to get a lot of subtractives in a specific direction, but you're going to be additive and oxidation and transformative are all just going to interact with the chemicals that are being handed from the subtractive. And so over time, it just changes what you get. And the real question is, what is it you're trying to make? All right, so with a little water, let's find out what has become water soluble and altered. Okay, this smells way more like classic wild turkey, but it also has a really beautiful chocolate cherry note that kind of pushed forward. And real dusty. So, way more palatable as far as easy drinking, way less complex, which is not surprising. It probably took this down to like 112 would be my guess from the water that I added, because I added 2 dashes, or 110. That's still high proof, but it doesn't have the same bite and interesting unveiling that was going on before. I liked it better without the water. I should probably not drink this first next time. Anyway, the simple version is these 3 things. Relatively lower entry proofs soften and pull out wood sugars and gentleness. Higher proof entries pull out astringent, tannins, and vanillins. But the real point is, you do what you do to get the taste you want, and if you like it, that's enough. Cheers to you, and I'm really glad you're here. If you like a higher proof entry video, proof entry videos. I don't know what a high proof entry video, anyway, like and subscribe.